Okay, so today we're going to learn about international negotiations. I think we have one or two who have taken my international negotiation course last semester. But today we're going to go over the basics of the negotiation tactics in addition to sort of culture aspects and then also power dynamics. And we'll do a lot of discussion today, so that's why I just want to make sure that you guys sit with a person from a different country. Okay, let's move on, but it's not working either. Okay, let me just fix this first. It was working before. Okay. Importance of communication. This is the basics that we've already covered, but we'll just recap. Can you read?
Importance of communications. Help to clarify misunderstandings, build trust, encourage collaboration, reduces hostility, fosters a peaceful resolution, find common ground, and strengthens relationships.
Yeah, so these are the basics. I emphasized again and again that in order to build like trustworthy relationship, it's very important that we find a common ground, right? So that's very, very important. And trust building is the first step that you can actually go on to a long-term relationship. Okay, understanding different perspectives. Who's next? Okay.
Understanding perspectives. Listen actively,
Yeah?
ask questions, identify underlying values and interests, show empathy, look for common ground, challenge assumption, avoid defensiveness, seek outside perspectives, seek feedback.
Right, so in order to understand different perspectives of different cultures and different people, active listening is the first step. As we've sort of covered the basics of the active listening. And also, after you listen well, then you can actually frame like really nice questions to start the conversation. And once you throw nice questions to the person that you really want to engage with, that's sort of the first step that you can actually make a relationship started. So it's very important that you know how to listen well, and based on that, you've sort of framed the nice questions that you can ask. Alright, so these are the 5 conflict resolution styles, but I just found this video very, very informative in terms of what type of negotiator you are. So let's have a look at this video. It's very short, so it's only 3 minutes. So when you actually watch this video, think about what type of communicator you are. Okay. Competition, collaboration, accommodation, avoid, and compromise. These are the 5 different negotiation or conflict resolution types, and you can sort of see what type of person you are or what kind of negotiator you are.
The Chinese say all great battles are won without fighting.
Sorry,
Okay?
I don't know him.
Okay, let's just hang out. Now I'm about to beat the puree out of you. You ain't gonna see it coming. You ain't gonna see it coming. Come on, Woo! Run for your lives. So it's time y'all show some respect around here. Huh?
Connor, wait for the master.
Whoa!
How about this? I promise I won't pester you about the DVD. You can defecate in peace. That's a win for both of us. Until this matter is resolved, I would like you to wear this sweater.
on a non-presidential basis to create an emergency ad hoc Slurpee IC equivalency?
Oh, Leonard, you know I can't do that.
Okay, I guess we only have one option.
Yep, I don't see any way around it.
Bye, Sheldon. See ya.
They're right, it was the only option.
With my dad, I realized the shadows coming off those two lamps were in the wrong spots. I think someone tampered with this crime scene. Who could do that? Someone smart, someone experienced. Which is why we need to recreate the scene so that it's exactly the way it was when the cops got it. Alright, fine.
Alright, so this was a rather sort of funny representation of different types of communication or negotiation that you can engage with. A lot of times when people think about negotiation, they think in terms of competition, but it's actually not. You know, you can actually avoid the issue at all costs if you feel that it doesn't. I mean, the matter of that you want to negotiate is not worth your time and energy.
Is increasing arable land estimation.
What's going on?
To produce more with less.
What's going on? What's going on? Oh, sorry. Sorry. Right. Or you can actually make a compromise. You can actually give something in return for something else. So this is like another very good way to actually engage with the negotiation. And collaboration. I really feel that Americans and like a lot of Western sort of elites are very good at collaborating. You know, and that's why they really want to engage with like as much conversation as possible, because from that way they sort of try to figure out how they can sort of collaborate in some areas and accommodate. This tactic happens a lot if you negotiate with somebody that you have a very important relationship with. So say you want to negotiate a car deal with your mom. You want to buy a car from your mom or mother-in-law, and it's completely different negotiation. If you were to negotiate, if you want to buy a car from a car dealer. So in this case, you actually have to accommodate the interests of your mom or your mother-in-law as much as possible, because you actually put a lot more emphasis on relationship over the outcomes that you can have. So I just want to remind you that there are different types of negotiation or the communication or the ways that you can actually resolve the conflicts. So just remembering that there are different ways actually helps you to figure out how you will actually deal with the matter at hand. Okay, so today we'll actually focus more on how power dynamics plays at hand during the negotiation processes. Okay, so let's have a look. Who's next?
Understanding power in negotiation, bargaining power, the ability to influence the terms and conditions of an agreement.
Right.
Derived from the alternatives, the data, resources, and the strategic positioning. Strong bargaining power increase leverage, perception of the power, how each party values power is distributed, and then with the last actual power, confidence and framing can alter perceptions, often more influential than real power itself.
Right, so before you engage with the negotiation process, you really have to assess very carefully what bargaining power you have. It's basically, what kind of power you have to play in order to engage with the discussion or the conversation with the person that you want to have the result from the negotiation. But a lot of people think in terms of like actual power that you or the partner that you're negotiating with has, but actually power is measured by the perception. What do you mean by perception? It's different from the reality, you know. So if you feel, so say we have the president of South Korea, you know, a Korean citizen will have a different perception of the power he has from, say, Pakistanese sort of student who actually views our president, because they have a completely different interest, you know, on the Korean politics and everything else. So they have a completely different perception on what kind of power the president of the Korea has, and actually your perception of the power he or she has determines what power you have. So perception of power, the perceived amount of power, perceived nature of the power is a lot more important than the actual power. So before you engage with negotiation process, always think that it's very important that you understand how your partner or the other person is actually viewing the bargaining power you have. You know, actually they might have a very different perception on the bargaining power you have from what you actually perceive yourself as. So it's very subjective. So negotiation, my boss used to tell me a lot that, you know, everything just plays by hand, everything plays by, you know, scenarios. And what it means is that, you know, if you prepare really well, and if you actually have a very nice assessment as to like what kind of bargaining power like each party has, you have a lot better results at the end, you know. So just remembering that, you know, the perception of power is very subjective, and the more you prepare, you can actually assess different, you know, like power structures that engages or that surrounds the negotiation process, and that's going to enhance your performance during the negotiation process. Okay, power election. Who's next?
Use of power tactics, hard tactics, threats, demands, deadlines,
Right.
soft tactics, persuasion appeals to values, collaboration, effective negotiators choose tactics based on context and goals, relationship building, long-term relationship often outweigh short-term gains,
Right.
trust, credibility, and mutual respect enhance power. Relational power can reduce resistance and increase cooperation.
Right. I don't know whether you've heard about these terms like hard power and soft power. If you have, you know, studied international relations, you know, they have like two different types of power in international relations. So like hard power includes like military strength, or the size of the land, you know, like these are all like tangible sort of power that a country has. Whereas soft power includes, you know, like diplomacy, or like trade, not the trade volume. Trade volume is more of hard power, but then, you know, I think diplomacy or is the prime example that soft power exhibits. So there are like different types of power, and you basically have to see whether you will focus on the assessment of the hard power versus soft power. But if you're engaging with a trade negotiation, actually assessing the soft power and then the soft sort of tactics is a lot more efficient than if you were to just talk about like military strength or the trade volumes and stuff like that. So one of my advisors from Oxford, he's the director of this institute called like KIAP. It's a 대외 경제 무역. He was the director of the big institute, and he's the one who actually made the deals for FTA. I think South Korea actually had made with FTA deals with more than like 100 countries, right? And then they were actually decided to do this because they really understood the power of, the nature of soft power. You know, so the trade volume itself is very important. But if you have a certain sort of institutional frame or institutional institutional like engagements done, then you can actually set the grounds very efficient, and you can actually set the grounds for a lot better results for the other deals. So once you actually made the FTA, free trade agreement deal with this country, that sets the ground for the deal with the other countries. So you actually, it works like a block, you know. So the team, the South Korean team understood the nature of the soft power and soft tactics very well. So they were able to engage with FTA deals with more than 100 countries very efficiently. So I actually had a conversation with my mentor, and he told me about all the nitty-gritties and, you know, like all these like little stories about the negotiation, and I was really impressed by it, because he really understood the nature of the soft power and, you know, like and diplomacy, and the reason that we're actually learning all these like skills and like tactics for like negotiation, communication, and like culture, like communication, they all add up to nurturing soft power skills, you know. So by understanding what kind of culture your negotiation partner has, you know, what kind of like cultural norms and like customs, you know, the other country or the other partner has, you can actually enhance the level of the soft power and the soft tactics that you have. So this is very important training and exercise for you to boost and to increase your soft power skills. All right, power and outcomes is next.
Power and outcomes. Negotiation outcome. Power shapes not only what is achieved but how it's achieved.
Right.
Imbalanced power can lead to
resentment
or unstable agreements. Balanced power dynamics often yield more sustainable win-win outcomes.
Right.
Key takeaways. Understanding and strategically using power can significantly impact negotiation success, especially when paired with strong relationship building skills.
Right. So right now you don't really have any experiences in terms of like the real negotiation. Maybe you had a very like sort of little negotiation over the prices of the goods that you want to buy and stuff like that, but it was not a full-scale sort of business deal. So you haven't really had any sort of real world experiences yet. But you actually see that, you know, not only understanding the power, but then the power dynamics among the participants engaging with the negotiation process is very important. And you really have to remember that a lot of Koreans or a lot of, I think people from the developing countries think of negotiation as a competition. So they always think that, oh, we have to win, you know, we have to like, you know, get the outcomes as much as possible from this round of negotiation. But I think the seasoned negotiators, like, you know, people with a lot of negotiation experiences, they really know the importance of the long run gains. So they, you know, consider the outcome of this round of negotiation as a stepping stone. And they always put more emphasis on building relationships with the person that you're negotiating with. So if you really want to succeed as a negotiator, and especially if you want to like have a really like big deal done, like for example, my friend, my mentor friend who actually did the FTA deals like with like many different countries, you know, he really knew, you know, like the first country that you actually do the negotiation with, you know, it's just the first stepping stone. And you really have to have a big picture, and you really have to have a long sort of term scale to assess, you know, what you really have to get from this negotiation round. So understanding, like, you know, the power dynamics, like different like people engaged with the negotiation is very important. But having that like long-term perspective, and you know, having the perspective, you know, about what this round of negotiation means and matters is also very important. So like think of negotiation as a collaboration process, and this is like something that I really want to emphasize. I have been emphasizing this a lot to my students. You know, like having this perspective really helps in terms of like, you know, planning your life as well. All right, so we'll just learn about like very basic concepts of negotiation, and if there's only one thing that you can remember out of this class, then it's this one, BETNA. So it's an abbreviation of best alternative to a negotiated agreement. So if you say like, oh, I've taken the negotiation course, and if you don't know this concept, then basically you haven't really paid any attention to the class. So this is the very basic concept that you really have to remember from the negotiation class. So what is BETNA? Whose turn is it?
BETNA, best alternative to a negotiated agreement. The best option available to a party if they are unable to reach an agreement with the other party. Strong BETNA. BETNA can walk away from negotiation easily. Weak BETNA can feel pressure to agree to terms not very favorable.
Right. So if you engage with any type of negotiation, you really have to prepare for your BETNA. So what do you mean by BETNA? So if this negotiation fails, then what would be the best alternative that you have in your hand? So say you're engaging, so this actually happened with one of my students who took my negotiation class. So she was working on a part-time job. So, and then she said that she was going to have a conversation with her boss on the payment rates. Although it was a part-time job, she's been working there for like over a year, so she was going to tell her boss that she wants some increase, in terms of the pay and the salary, the part-time job salary. And she basically prepared a nice BETNA. So if this talk with her boss doesn't work out, I can actually go to another shop to start working over there, right? And then she actually done some research on the payment range that she can actually have if this talk doesn't work, So she's been actually doing some research, kind of like, it's not a full-scale research, but like a little research on the average salary that a person, doing a similar part-time job in her age gets. So she actually gave that statistics, like the average sort of salary scale, and she basically explained, but she was very polite, and she explained very politely that I've been enjoying this job a lot, and I'm really happy that I can learn so much about this, and I would like to continue working here. But at the same time, it'd be very nice if I could get a slight increase in my payment. And she basically offered her boss the BETNA range, and that really works well. So for any type of negotiation, if you want to start that, you really have to think hard, and you really have to do some research, serious research on the best alternative that you can get if the negotiation fails. And this is what my brother did when he was talking with the CEO of the consulting firm that he's working for in Canada. The Canadians are Western people. They're very very savvy, so they're very not calculative, but very sort of much into the reasoning stuff. So my brother prepared a very strong BETNA based on some research and some statistics, and that made a very good persuasion point. So BETNA is very, very important. So if you have a strong BETNA, so say if the job talk doesn't work, but then you can go on to another job, and then that job basically offers you a better salary. It doesn't necessarily have to be salary only, but if it gives you a better environment or better opportunities for promotion, then it's actually a stronger BETNA. So think about what would be the good BETNAs that you can prepare, and then you actually use the BETNAs as a leverage to negotiate with a person, with a person that you talk to. So this is a very, very important concept and important preparation that you have to do. Okay, so examples of BETNA. I've already given you a student negotiating with their parents about college choice. Employee negotiating with their boss on salary increase, consumer negotiating with the dealer on car purchase, So if you want to buy a car, then basically have to go to as many stores as possible, or meet up with as many dealers as possible, because you really want to have the best BETNA ready, and you basically compare and contrast the best prices that you can get. And it works because you have best BETNAs out of the various contexts that you have. Okay, so the second concept that you can remember is called ZOPA, and it's called the Zone of Possible Agreement. I mean, this is something that you can actually understand very simple. I mean, I think it's more like intuitive, but let's see what this means, ZOPA.
The range of possible outcomes that is acceptable to both parties in a negotiation.
Right.
The area of overlap between the two parties, reservation prices, which
Right.
are the minimum amount that they are willing to accept, helps to identify potential areas of agreement and allows both parties to negotiate within a reasonable range.
Right, so suppose you want to buy a carpet. I mean, you're traveling in Turkey and you really want to buy a nice Turkish or the Persian carpet. The seller of the Persian carpet would love to have as highest price as possible, right? But then, he's also thinking, okay, what would be the minimum price that he can sell this carpet, So the price range for the seller might be from 1,500 to 3,000. That's the range of prices that is acceptable for the seller. But it's a different story for the buyer. I'm traveling to Turkey. I'm really planning to visit my friends in Turkey. But I'm thinking okay, I really want to buy a very nice carpet. But for me, a price over 1,600 is unacceptable, But lowest prices, I mean, if I can get the carpet as low as $800 or $500, it'd be very nice. But for me, anything over 1,600 is not workable. In this case, if I just go into this shop and then I look at the carpet, and then if you see the price range, it actually overlaps. The overlapped range is basically 1,500 to 1,600, right? So my reservation point as a buyer was 1,600, whereas the reservation point for the seller of the carpet, the shop owner, is 1,500. And there's overlap, right? So if somehow there's $100 overlap, and zone of agreement, ZOPA, is basically the 1,500 to 1,600. That's the zone of agreement, ZOPA. So if there's an overlapped area, then that means the negotiation works, So I can get the carpet with the 1,500 or 1,600. So basically you have to think about what would be the best price of this good or of this deal for the seller, and the worst possible price. And what would be the best possible price and worst possible price for the buyer? And you assess the reservation points, and if there's an overlap, then there's a high possibility that the negotiation works. So you actually use this concept for that purpose. All right, the next concept is called anchoring. This is very relevant for today's world with the President Trump, because this is something that he uses a lot for his negotiation technique. Who's next?
The strategy of making the first offer or presenting a number, figure, or proposal as a reference point for the rest of the negotiation.
Right.
Influences the other party's perception of what is reasonable or expected, sets the tone for the rest of the negotiation.
Yeah, so for any type of negotiation, the first price to be suggested is the most important. So whomever actually sets the initial price sets the whole stage for the whole negotiation process. So, Donald Trump, he's been a negotiator for all his business career. And he's very famous for setting the anchoring price very, very high. And I think he does the same with a lot of countries nowadays, with China, with tariffs. So how much percentage he actually proposed at the beginning? It was 120, right? Yeah. and it's nonsense for a lot of people. Like you actually like you say like 120% for tariffs, like is not thinkable for a lot of people. But he actually uses it as an anchoring tactic. So he sets up the stage, you know, and it's like nonsensibly high, and people actually anchor their expectations based on the initial price. So they actually think in terms of 120% of tariffs. You know, they actually think and calculate their best possible positions out of the first price that has been set, and that's called anchoring. So this is very important. So before you actually begin any type of negotiation, you really have to think hard, okay, who's going to say the first? Who's going to say the first price? Who actually has the power? Who has who has that? I don't think it's actually the courage, but I think it's more about the power dynamic that dominates the whole scene. So you really have to see whether your team or you can actually set the stage by doing the anchoring. And this is a very important tactic that you can remember. Right, so using these different power dynamics, a lot of different negotiation happens. So let's have a look at the typical negotiation cases. Who's next?
Types of negotiation: power dynamics, labor union negotiation, merger and acquisition negotiation, international trade negotiation, real estate negotiation, business partnership negotiation.
Right, so labor union, M&A, international trade, real estate, business like deals, they all involve power dynamics. But I think the strongest example, or the prime example, is international relations. Is basically the war sort of dynamics, the hard power dynamics, politics. So the political power sort of determines. But again, I really want to emphasize, even the power, you really have to remember that it's a perception, it's subjective. You can actually alter the power dynamics by actually changing the perception you have or your partner has. Okay, so we've just dealt with the power dynamics within the negotiation process, and we're going to actually change into a cultural dynamics within the negotiation process. Okay, who's next?
Cultural difference in negotiation and conflict resolution. Communication styles, attitude towards risk, attitudes towards confrontation, relationship building, time orientation, negotiation styles, conflict resolution strategies, and cultural norms.
Right, so different cultures have like different norms and customs on this like different criteria, and we're going to discuss about the differences in like major countries like including China, US, the Middle Eastern countries, and like UK. But before we do that, we'll have some like little discussions with the person in front. But do you have people? So okay, who's missing? So let's have a look. Okay, so you two, this works here. Okay, you guys work. All right, Mahina, could you just sit there and then have So you guys talk. That's it. Oh, okay. No, Hassan, can you swap? All right, so look for any students, like this person at the back who's from a different culture, and let them speak about their own experiences in cross-cultural negotiation and different styles. Do you guys have a very different sort of culture backgrounds in terms of negotiation? So let's talk about the differences. If you have any like experiences in like doing some negotiation, it can be just little as like buying apples or like buying groceries or like in the markets, and just share your experiences and how like people engage differently in your country.
My girlfriend is not a Korean. Sometimes I talk with her. You know, like a Korean culture is very not express their real emotion, and whatever they wanna do, they never express. For me, it's fake. Always like thinking too much of others. Not a bad way, but always to think about it. Is it good behavior or good act for others? Just don't care about life. Follow others. Sometimes, but I really see that when I talk with my friends, but it's not a bad way. You should do it. So, it's the first time, not like a bigger dating relationship, before like a crush. Always when I talk with her, when I heard that the speakers, everything, I was like, whoa. You can sing like that. You can speak like that. And I know I'm too much like hide my opinion. So after that, I start to talk like a little bit directly. I think it's better, but it's really different culture of the Korean and the Europe and they speak. That is my experience. Huge experience.
For me, when okay, so it's like that time I have we going to drink my Korean friends were room. So there's two foreigner girls and four Korean boys and we'll talk about gender, like LGBTQ community and like I feel like Korean is so well because of this fighting.
Very conservative.
And they actually not only like lesbian, transgender, and gay people, but when me and my friends try to tell them that they're non-binary and blah 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 and so on, they just and they was like, wow, you guys just send me to another universe. They were shocked, and they not get used to the program.
Yeah, actually for me, it's not a like when no I think it's because the Korean education is not really, and it's an organized way to be very conservative and only girl and boy. Yeah, not. I think it's not good for. It's not a these days. It's not good. It's not good. And many Koreans, even for me, I love my friends. Some of my friends, they really like bad eyes of the like they have a prejudice because they think the gender is I think Korean society is always like hide not in the mean, like a real open mind, like for me, open mind is not like open mind to see the open side and know the real everything. But Koreans, many Koreans, their side is really it really, as a Korean, I think and because we can change our education and be more good.
But I feel like nowadays, change a lot.
Yeah, I feel only one population. It's only Korean population. Not like multicultural. I think one of the reasons like that's why especially one not a multicultural. Even I talk with them, like I don't know why we talk about she asked me if she really was can you love me like really but don't think they are like for me not easy. It's not yeah, so I can fly so and I asked opposite. I think I was a transgender. You can love me. Then she don't care. So I was like, oh, yeah. I always like to learn something to create.
No, I think I agree, very different.
Yeah, very one of the big reasons I think
we can just
people
Korean hate Korean.
They just hate each other every party. When they involve in party, they start to hate others. Every single yeah. Why have you classified
when it comes to the child of Korean people, they just dislike and kind of fight.
People by good.
No, but actually, most of them are like open and like they always include me in their they just don't care about it.
That's normal. That's like you. I think it's funny. I don't care. It's okay. We're not the like get married. By the way, just a friend. Respect. I don't have much like that kind of maybe like European people. They usually they wash their hair like 3 days in one day, 3 days in one day. But for me, I wash my hair daily 2 times. In the morning, after before the meet. But I think it's just to wash hair in 1 time or 2 times. have is none of her previous so I got shocked. What? She washed her hair in like 3 days? For me, it's like, oh, and today, what? You wash your hair in 2 times in a day?
For me, I don't have much culture software of like nothing new.
Yeah. Sure. Actually, I don't know. I don't have like experience to live abroad. Just a trip. But trip is a trip. Totally different.
So actually, like learn about different cultures when I go to the country by going out. When I learn like how people.
Yeah. I've never been like this. I've only been like Asia countries a lot of times. I plan to go to my Spanish just one thing. But there's a goal to purpose or check that I can live abroad. I want to live
but maybe I didn't live
I don't know what you must do.
Okay, let's get back. We can do some more negotiation in the second half of the class. Alright. Okay, well done. So let's have a look at some of the differences in like negotiation styles. We'll just compare Chinese and Korean negotiation styles first. I guess a lot of people think that like East Asian cultures, they have similar negotiation styles or like customs and norms, but I think we are very different. So let's have a look. Who's next? Oh, you can't see?
Yes. Chinese versus Korean negotiation. Aspect, communication. Chinese culture, indirect, high context, face saving. Korean culture, indirect, respectful, high context.
Right, so Chinese and like Korean cultures have similarity in a way that we're very indirect. You know, we try to be polite, so we actually use lots of indirect expressions. And high context, what do you mean by high context? We learned about high context versus low context. You have a life for guys. we had exams on high context versus low context. Yeah. So indirect, a lot of indirect sort of rules, you know, for high context. The low context, like American, is very direct. But Chinese and Koreans are a bit different because I guess Koreans are more hierarchical in a way that we actually give a lot of respect for seniority. Whereas I really feel that Chinese are more direct in the sense. So a lot of people say that Koreans are more Confucian than Chinese. So we actually have a more, I think the most intensified form of Confucianism in the Asian culture. So we imported Confucianism from China, but then our form of Confucianism is a lot more intense with the exams and with the way we address the other people. And for Confucian culture, there's a lot of emphasis on seniority and hierarchy. So that's why Korean way of communication and thinking tends to be more hierarchical and more emphasis on seniority. So a lot of people say that we're actually more sort of rule-based. The Koreans are more rule-based in a way. A lot more emphasis on like customs and stuff. Okay, can you go on?
Risk attitude. Chinese. Risk averse, favors long-term stability. Korean. Moderately cautious, prefers predictability.
Yeah, so I think in terms of risk sort of assessment or risk attitudes, Chinese and Koreans are more risk averse. We tend not to take too much risk. I mean, we actually prefer not to take too much risk. So I think that way we're sort of similar.
Confrontation. Chinese. Avoids direct conflict, seeks harmony. Korean. Avoids conflicts, values harmony and seniority.
Yeah, so similar except the seniority element.
Relationship. Chinese.
관시.
Kwanshi. Trust before business. Korean. Inmek.
Do you know this expression? 인맥.
I don't know.
Oh, memorize this one.
Okay.
인맥 it's a very important expression in Korean language. But you guys, for non-Korean students here, 인맥 is a very important concept. 인맥 plays a lot in Korean society and culture. You ask your Korean friends about 인맥, they will actually tell you a lot of stories. Okay?
Inmek. Trust and loyalty built over time.
Yeah, it's like a ties with the family, with the same regions, and like you have Jeonbukdae 인맥 as well. With the same school. So all these different ties, and you basically seek to discover the ties, the common ties that you have, and then from that on, you try to have some businesses like started or something like that, or get a job or something.
Time orientation. Patient, long-term focus. Korean. Flexible, long-term relationship value.
Oh, I have a question. Do you have a similar concept in your country? Uzbekistan, do you have like a concept like inmek? No? Kwanshi? Like concept like this in Uzbekistan? What is it called? What about Bangladesh? Do you have it?
Not really.
Not really. Do you have like inmek, a concept like inmek?
Loyalty built over time.
Yeah, like ties, like personal ties, like school ties, like family ties, like do you have a overall concept that
It depends on person to person. It's not like all over my country, but some people.
okay, so it doesn't exist. What about Philippines?
It means a connection.
Yeah, connection. But do you have the expression?
No.
No expression? China? What is it called? Okay, Cambodia.
It's been a long time.
Oh, it's been a long time since you left.
Yeah.
Cambodia?
Yeah, we have in.
What is it called?
Well, we call it like Dum Nokja.
Dum Nokja?
Yeah.
Oh, great. Dum Nokja. What about Thai?
I have to search.
Okay. I'll give you some time to research and you can tell me 5 minutes later. Okay, let's go on. Time orientation. I think we did it. All right. Negotiation style. Yeah.
Chinese. Holistic, strategic, may revisit agreements. Korean. Hierarchical, internal, consensus
driven. Yeah, so for Koreans, consensus making is very, very important. So if there's a person who disagrees with the deal, then the deal doesn't make, right? It's not held. So I think in the Korean culture, because of the Confucian influence, we put a lot of emphasis on like what the senior person says, and we basically have to follow it. So because of that element, I think there's a lot more emphasis on consensus in the Korean culture. Conflict resolution.
Conflict resolution. Chinese. Prefers mediation and compromise. Korean. Indirect resolution, sometimes through
Intermediaries, yeah.
Cultural norms. Collectivist, face hierarchy. Korean. Group harmony, seniority, loyalty.
Right, so for Koreans, because of the Confucian value, we emphasize a lot on the seniority and loyalty to family ties and stuff like that. But for Chinese, because of their communist culture, there's an element of collectivism. You know, a communist basically is a collect. What do you mean by collectivist? Hassan, what? Yeah, so it comes from collect, right? It's the opposite of individualism, right? There's a lot more emphasis on individuals, whereas in collectivist culture, there's a lot more emphasis on like the state, the community, or the collection of the people, right? Okay, so what's the Thai expression? อินแมท But that's difficult to follow.
It's สายสัมพันธ์ it means
สายสัมพันธ์
when you want to gain some trust and loyalty, you have to build it from nothing,
Oh,
and it's grow longer.
that sounds different from inmate. Alright, maybe it's more
But
like
the
a
same-
relationship.
the same- No, everything, even like the business
Oh.
or like it can use it anything.
Alright, okay. So like I think yeah, we have some similarities, but then I think there is a slight difference. Okay, so we have a difference between the Chinese and Korean styles, and let's have a look at the Middle Eastern culture. I have a slight reservation because I'm Korean, so I know a lot about the differences of the East Asian culture or the Asian cultures. But Middle Eastern people might think that they have a lot of differences amongst themselves. So maybe it's difficult to generalize, but let's just have a look.
Essential of wisdom is the negotiation culture.
Right?
Communication, indirect, expressive, often high context.
Yeah, so it's similar to Asian culture's high context. There are a lot of hidden sort of invisible norms that you have to follow. Yep.
Risk attitude, moderate risk tolerance, depend on trust level.
Yeah, so I think again here there's more. It's a more trust-based society.
Confrontation, avoid open disagreement, value personal time.
Dignity. Yeah, so it's sort of, I can't say it's a feudal, but it's a very hierarchical society as well. So I told you that when we had an appointment, if the very higher up, if the very senior person is late, then we basically have to either change the appointment time or just wait on and on and on. Relationship,
personal trust, and hospitality are crucial.
Right.
Time orientation, flexible relationships
is more important.
It's more important strict deadlines.
Yeah, because it's such a high context culture, so they can actually change the time pretty flexibly, you know. And I don't think they have a lot of reservation, or they don't really have problems like changing. That's how I felt.
Negotiation style,
lengthy
relationship first, often non-linear.
Yeah, we learned about non-linear style of negotiation. You know, they don't actually have a set agenda. They can actually change the agendas and the way. And if there's a more important person coming into the negotiation, they can change the whole agenda. So it's very like sort of fluid, and they don't actually follow the set pattern. You know.
Conflict resolution, prefer informal dialogue and mutual respect. Cultural norms, honor, loyalty, hospitality, family, and tribal ties.
Yeah, so a lot of these Middle Eastern countries are kingdoms. You know, if they have like princesses, so I think their structure of society is very different in a way. I mean, I can't say it's a feudal system, but there are a lot more emphasis on the family sort of tree and family lines, and you basically have to follow the hierarchy of the social sort of status, and you know, so they have a lot of hidden rules that they have to follow, and they have this assumption that they can change the rules and times according to this hierarchical sort of structure. So I think this is very different from the Asian or the East Asian cultures, but I think the huge difference is coming from the American negotiation style. So I think the Americans at the very end, you know, and then comes like the Europeans, and sort of in the middle are like the middle, the East Asian, like Singaporeans, and like sort of at the very end, you know, we have like Middle Eastern and like sort of African people. So we have all this like spectrum. So let's have a look at the American negotiation culture. Who's next?
Essentials of American negotiation culture.
Right.
Communication, direct, low complex expression.
Americans are very direct, and because they are direct, you guys have to direct. I think this is something that you really have to learn if you want to start working at an American company or like an international company. A lot of people in the leadership positions are American. So you basically have to learn how they communicate. They're very direct, and they prefer you to be direct and to express your ideas and opinions very explicitly.
Risk attitude, high risk tolerance, opportunity driven.
Yeah, but I like the way they're very tolerant of risk taking. They always say like fail faster, you know, fail more often, so that you can actually learn out of the experiences. And also somehow your relationship with the other person or this project or this business can create more opportunities for them. They don't actually care about the personal ties. They don't actually care too much about the inmate, you know. I think Americans are more like project and opportunities driven.
Confrontation, open to debate and disagreement.
Yeah, and then they actually love to engage with the sort of talks or conversations, debates which are in disagreement. So they actually prefer to talk with a person who actually disagrees, especially if it's a sort of intellectual conversation. People actually prefer to hear from a person who actually has a very different perspective or a viewpoint.
Relationship, task focused relationship by follow your making.
Right, because they're opportunity driven, there's a lot more emphasis on tasks and deal making than relationship. So as long as the project works, they don't really care about the long-term relationship or you know what kind of relational aspects the project or the task is involved. And as long as the work is done, I mean, that's what matters.
Time orientation, time sensitive, deadline driven.
Yeah, so they're very punctual and they really want to follow the set schedules.
Negotiation style, competitive, issue-based, goal-oriented.
Yeah, because Americans are very much task-focused. So when you actually try to negotiate with the Americans, you basically have to set the agendas very clear. What are the areas that you want to discuss? And what are the expectations that you have out of the negotiation? So, having a very direct and explicit picture of like different criteria or different areas that you want to discuss with, and actually have a very exact timetable helps you to have a deal with the Americans.
Conflict resolution, legalistic, proper structural resolution.
Right. America is a very legalized society, which means, what do you mean by legalized? Which means everything is done in lawsuits. So if something goes wrong, then you actually file a lawsuit. So they spend a lot of money on lawyers, on hiring lawyers. So it's a very contract-driven society. So I told you the letter writing is very, very important because they actually use this semi-contracts and also to some extent emails. So these are all the evidences they actually keep. So I don't know. Oh yeah, when we actually had a negotiation role play between the Japanese and Americans, Americans they actually keep records of all the documents that they exchange with, whether they be emails or like letters, like all types of like written documentation. It's very important because they can actually use it for legal lawsuit. To filing a lawsuit. So you basically have to remember where they're coming from.
Cultural norms, individualism, meritocracy, effectiveness.
Yeah, meritocracy means those who perform well, those who are more intelligent, those who produce better results, regardless of the family ties or like social status. The performance is what matters the most. That's the definition of meritocracy, because they're very much task focused and like project focused. They really want to have the outcome made. You know, you can actually see that they're sort of cold. You know, they don't actually care too much about the relationship. But a lot of my like, I don't know, how multicultural friends. So I had a Korean German friend. I think I've told you about him, that he's been adopted by a German family, and you know, he's been raised in Germany. But he said that he never felt he belonged to German society, because Germans have this very monolithic concept of citizenship. So although he was born in Germany, he has, you know, officially German citizenship, culturally he doesn't feel belonging there, because Germans, they emphasize on, you know, the German blood. Whereas in the States, it's an immigration society. It's actually a society built upon immigration of a lot of different ethnicities and nationalities. So that's why they put so much emphasis on contract, you know, on letters. And my German friend actually says that he feels most belonging in the States, in America, because there it's very multicultural, and as long as you can actually do the projects together, as long as you keep the promise, and as long as you can, you know, work together, your ethnicities or your backgrounds or whatever sort of family backgrounds you have doesn't really matter. So in a way, it's a very meritocratic society and rule-based. So I think that's where their competitiveness, American competitiveness, comes from. All right, so I was actually thinking about the European negotiation style, but again, I think they have a general sort of like cultural differences for the European. We have one European here, but because I lived in Europe for so long, I really feel that the French, Germans, and British so different. You know, I think they're more different than, like, say, Chinese and Koreans. You know, so I was like thinking, can I say like European culture, like European negotiation culture? But no, because like French and British is so different. You know, like French are very vocal, whereas British people are very reserved. So I Googled, and you know, I think UK is actually the second country which has the most number of multinational companies, multinational institutions and companies. So I just picked up UK as a representative, not the representative, but as one country belonging to European sort of negotiation culture. So let's have a look at the UK negotiation culture. Who's next? Yeah.
Communication, polite, moderately, indirect, understate tone.
Right. So although a lot of Americans, they have British heritage, British and American communication styles is very, very vastly different. I sometimes feel the British are more like Koreans. They're very reserved, very polite. I mean, they rarely talk when they see you for the first time, you know. Koreans are like that, you know, we are very reserved, you know. But, and they're very, very polite, and a lot of times they don't like to exaggerate. Americans are very good at exaggerating, right? But British, no. They actually prefer to understate than exaggerate. Okay, go on.
Balanced attitude, but risk attitude, balanced analytical decision making.
Yeah, and the British people really like to analyze about many different areas. So they put a lot of it. You know, they actually like to read a lot, and by the readings that they do, they like to analyze like different aspects of the problem. And I really feel that this is something that the British people are very good at as well. Confrontation.
Confrontation avoids emotional displays, prefer diplomacy.
Right, and British people, they are very reserved, so they actually they don't prefer to express their emotions too strongly.
Relationship, professional trust is valued, personalized secondary.
Right, but again in UK, professional sort of work together as a professional is much more important than the family or personal ties that you have. So INMEC is important in the UK and the States as well, but I think more so is the professional capacity that you have. You know, if you can collaborate well, you know, regardless of your like ethnicity, religion, or like age, whatever, as long as you can work together well, that's what matters. And I really like this culture. I really cherish this culture.
Time orientation, punctual, structured by this preparation.
Yeah, I think this is a commonality that a lot of Europeans and Americans, or the Western culture has. The Western culture puts a lot of emphasis on punctuality. So I think this is the key sort of characteristics that defines the European, the Western culture. A lot of emphasis on like punctuality, like timetable, like doing according to the timetable.
Negotiation style, formal, logical, consensus seeking.
Yeah, so I told you that they like to analyze like a lot of problems like from different aspects, and because of that, there's they are actually pretty much developed in terms of like logical thinking, So kids are actually educated about the logical thinking, and they've been asked whether the argument they are making is logical or not from early on. When they're like 6 years old or 7 years old, even when they read a fairy tale or a book, when they're having a conversation with their parents or with the teachers, the adults always ask whether what they think and whether their thinking is logical or reasonable. So British people say a lot about like, whether it's reasonable or not. Reasonable. What about French? Do they talk a lot about like reasonable, whether it's reasonable or not, like logical or not?
I think so.
Yeah, so I think.
In France, how can I say that? The education style is more talkative.
Yeah.
Before it was more strict.
Yeah. Yes, there are a lot of conversation, right?
Yes.
Yeah. When we had an exam, midterm exam, I told you to write in essay forms. And only a few of you guys actually wrote in essay forms. And Andrea, having been educated in French education system, she actually wrote, she actually structured like every answer into one essay form. I was actually quite surprised. So everything combined as one essay. And if I didn't know about the differences in education system, I would have been very surprised. But I know that how French people are educated, so I could actually understand where you're coming from. So don't worry, I got you. Okay.
Conflict resolution, preference for reasoned discussion, and compromise.
Right. Reasoning again.
Cultural norms, courtesy, reserve, fair play, understatement.
Yeah, so they place a lot of emphasis on being fair. I think a lot of young generation Koreans, they emphasize the fair play a lot these days. So I think there's a generation difference. But again, these are the characteristics of the negotiation style, but you can see that they actually reflect a lot of the cultural elements. So how they are brought up with, how their society functions, it affects their negotiation styles. Okay, so these are some of the elements of the high. We learned about the high context of culture versus low context culture, high power distance, and long-term orientation, short-term orientation. Whether you actually think in long-term or you only focus on the short-term outcome. That's what it means by like time orientation. So a lot of, if you really want to focus on the relational aspect, then you actually have to have a long-term orientation. Whereas you just focus on the outcomes of the negotiation, you tend to have a short-term orientation. And high power distance basically means the hierarchical society. So high power distance, basically if you have more power in terms of like seniority or like social status, and more distance is created. Whereas like low power distance is more egalitarian. So I told you in the States, as long as you can work together, it doesn't matter like how old you are. I guess you have to become an adult if you want to become, participate in the professional project. But where you're coming from, even your educational background, they matter to some extent, but as long as you can work together, your other background doesn't matter as much. So America is a prime example of low power distance country. And we know about the collectivism, like communism is a very good example of like a collectivism. And individualism, a lot of liberal democracies like America, UK, they emphasize a lot on individualism. So you can see these are sort of cultural norms that affect the cultural traits and that define the whole communication and negotiation styles. Alright, so you can actually have a look at this one. This is pretty long, so I'm just going to skip it. So this is the final sort of element of the negotiation, and I really want to emphasize on the emotional management side. This is something that's ignored a lot, but I really want to emphasize that emotional aspect of negotiation process is very, very important. So who's next?
Recognize and acknowledge emotions. Take a break. Practice active listening. Use I statements. Practice empathy. Use positive self-talk. Seek support.
Right, so before you actually make a very important deal, it's always very important that you take a break. You know, say you want to finalize a deal, and you can actually say, oh, let's just make a 5-minute to 10-minute break. You know, and that actually gives you a room to think. You know, and it's a very important tactic to manage your emotion, and you know, actually by doing that, you actually think in more like long-term orientation. And also use I statements. That's very, very important. When you express your emotion, when we get really emotional, like we tend to blame others, but it's a very, very wrong way to communicate. So when I want to express my emotion, I always have to start my statement with me, you know, with I. So I say, oh, I feel really angry that, you know, this deal went this way. You know, you don't blame the others. Or you're wrong to say so, don't do that. You just express your emotion using I or we. In that way, you can actually lessen the tension. You know, so this is an important way. Even with like, you know, when you talk with your girlfriend or boyfriend, this is really important. This is a good way that you can actually talk with your girlfriend or boyfriend, like even with your like spouse. Use I statement when you express your emotion. Like try to start a sentence or a statement with I, how I feel, rather than saying like what the other person feels. Okay, so we're just gonna end the negotiation presentation with a final YouTube video. I found this video very, very inspiring. So it's only 3 minutes long. So let's just have a look and let's finish this one. Oh, this is not. Okay.
I'm a business negotiation consultant. So my professional life centers.
All right. Okay. Emotion, not logic.
Everything we do in life is a series of decisions. Decisions are the key to any success we have in any human performance event. Our secret is the foundation of everything we teach, coach, and do with our system of negotiation and our clients. You know, it's a law of science. The human brain cannot make a logical decision. Decisions are made 100% emotionally and then validated by our library of knowledge, experience, training, practice. The great flaw is that 99% of the world does not know or believe the science. They have a mindset that's been celebrated for being smart. How often do you hear someone say, you have to make a logical decision? Or I want to make a logical decision. And you know what? It's not possible. You know, we go to school, we study, we take tests, we celebrate how smart and logical we are. And as we get older, we're rewarded for being so smart. In fact, we think we know what will happen. We think we know what someone will say or do, but we don't know. We don't have a clue. And that's the great flaw. I see people who work very hard to present a logical response to strikes the logic, the intellect of the other party, where decisions aren't made. In fact, they can't be made in that part of the brain. And the fact is that all of that intellect, all that data throws a wet blanket on decision making. Just go to a party, a social gathering, a group of people, and watch people discuss the logic of politics. And slowly but surely watch the discussion heat up to a fever pitch. Yet in the same setting, somewhere in that gathering, is someone telling a story. Watch the storyteller who's creating vision and emotion. That person will have an audience, and they'll be listening intently. It's that emotional area of the brain, that connection and the emotion, where you have the impact on the other party's decision making. Because that's where we all make 100% of our decisions, not logic. And it's the well-trained coach negotiator who knows that creating vision and appealing to the emotion is the secret to successful negotiations.
Right, so I really think his point is very valid. So a lot of cases people think about like logical responses or like, you know, whether it's reasonable, like logical, like, but then it's not the main sort of drive. I mean, it's not the main sort of element to drive the decision-making process. So he's pointing out that it's the emotion, you know, the emotion of the partner that you're engaging with, or emotion or the atmosphere of the whole negotiation space, and the vision that's been created as a result of the conversation that you have. So the vision and the emotion, they are the main drivers to make the decisions happen. You know, I mean, to let the decisions made and make them happen. So instead of like trying to engage with the negotiation partners, like, you know, with that logical or like a persuasive sort of reasoning, you think what the other person or the other team might feel and what is the vision or the goal that they have. You know, so these are the two main areas that you really have to think hard before you start the negotiation, as well as within the negotiation. And also, when you try to finalize the decision-making process, you always take a break, okay? All right, so this is the end of the international negotiation presentation. And the second half of the class, we'll actually do our first international relations role play. So we've only done the business negotiations or like the role play so far, but we'll actually do some military military sort of related international relations role play today. So yeah, so let's take a 5-minute break, and after you come back, I'll just let you know how to do it. Okay.